Ladies and gentlemen, this is very interesting. And William Barr is right. Washington Examiner, William Barr encourages prosecutors to consider sedition charges. This, of course, is for fiery yet peaceful protests. Attorney General William Barr reportedly told federal prosecutors to consider charging violent protesters with plotting to overthrow the government if they can prove it, which is essentially what many people... I'm not talking about mostly peaceful protests. Fine. Mostly peaceful protests throughout the country is not relevant to what William Barr is talking about, nor is it relevant to the $1.4 billion in property damage throughout the country. It's not... That's a different ballgame. So Democrats and media, what they do is they try to muddy the waters. They can't acknowledge that there's $1.4 billion in property damage primarily in Democratic-run states and Democratic-run cities and Democratic-run states who also have the highest number of lives lost because of the pandemic and who also have the highest unemployment rates. But Barr's advice came as he warned U.S. attorneys general in a call earlier in September that violent demonstrations might worsen as Election Day draws closer, according to the Wall Street Journal. You have people who want anarchy. You have a certain number of people. Maybe they're small in number, but their ideology is that the United States is not a noble, not a good, not a just society that needs to be torn down and rebuilt in the image of whatever. Either in the image of the Democratic Party or either in the image of the Democratic Party or a new utopian world like Portland. So, I mean, who knows exactly what the ideology is, but you do have people who have engaged in a great deal of violence that believe the United States in its current form is either sinister or just a hotbed of everything horrible you could think of, from racism to misogyny to just an immoral place. And it's not my words, it's their words. Okay, I don't want to get too into it, but that's the mentality of a small subset of people on the left. It's in their name, who actually want anarchy. That essentially is sedition. Legally, I don't know. So William Barr's legal case, I'm not sure of. By the way, be here at 9 p.m. Pacific. We have the best late evening live stream. I might actually talk about this in the late evening live stream, but you get sedition charges, and you actually are on Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff talking about overthrowing the government. You're in a world of hurt, because it's going to be very difficult for a lot of these people to get out this type of prosecution or charge or to circumvent this type of legal statute, because they're actually very open in their ideology, especially online. And then you have to factor in, so be here 9 p.m. Pacific this evening, best late evening live stream in all of YouTube. I might talk about this tonight. But then you have to address the issue of what 10%, maybe 5% of, or maybe 2 or 3%, okay, of these organizations are infiltrated by federal or state agents. I mean, this is something that would also help charge people under sedition. If you have, because their whole thing is, oh, well, you can't charge us under sedition. We're not centralized, and we're not part of an organization. And furthermore, you can't prove we want to overthrow the government. And it's like, well, let's see. If you have a government informant working alongside you, or sorry, I should say either an informant or an actual agent working alongside you, then they can gather a whole lot of evidence pertaining to the fact that, yeah, you don't like the country. You think the country is immoral, needs to be, torn down and rebuilt. And whatever other statement or belief system that exists among these people that just, set police buildings ablaze. But let's continue. Among several federal charges, Barr encouraged prosecutors to pursue. He cited the Sedition law, a rarely used legal statute. Experts argue it would be difficult to enforce. In order to bring a sedition case, prosecutors would have to look beyond rhetoric and prove prove people conspired to attack government officials that posed an imminent danger. Attack government officials. Sorry. A wide-ranging plot to attack government officials, and this plot posing an imminent danger. Well, that's not that difficult. There are people who are using money derived from a source or sources. There are people using social media to communicate. There are people communicating with one another. I mean, this is not difficult, especially what I just said right now, when you have maybe 2 or 3 or 5%. Look at this is an example. Okay. The people who protested and fought and gave their lives and risked their lives in the civil rights movement are noble, heroic, and we have always, for the past 40 years, when I was growing up in school, always celebrated them. And from, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Medgar Evers, everybody that was in the civil rights, Malcolm X, everybody who was in the civil rights movement, either who risked their lives or who lost their lives were taken, are considered heroes. Now, we look back at that time, and these are heroic people, and still the United States government infiltrated many organizations. So it happened in the civil rights movement. This is not, in my view, has nothing to do with what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Was talking about. Oh, I should say obviously doesn't, because William Barr is only focusing on people who engaged in property damage and violence and attacked people. So if you're talking about the United States government going after civil rights organizations and infiltrating them, obviously they're infiltrating. There is no heroic, noble man or woman who is leading like people who are engaging in such protests, so violent protests. So you gotta ask yourself, what percentage of those people or those organizations are either informants or government officials? Okay, and then you have, because there's no political will and there's no moral justification for property damage and widespread violence. So when CNN says fiery yet mostly peaceful, that is a siren to William Barr to say, okay, who are the people doing this? How many informants or how many government officials do we have alongside them? By the way, I'm making a claim without evidence. I'm just looking at history and saying, well, since the United States government and local state governments also have infiltrated all types of organizations, especially civil rights organizations, it makes sense that they would infiltrate the organizations of today that want anarchy. Even though, obviously, I'm not comparing one era to another, because one era you have people who are completely heroic and fighting for a true just cause. Then you have, and I'm not speaking about BLM, I'm talking only about the protest, the violent people who want anarchy that William Barr is going to go after. So I guess I'm engaging in this long-winded point, but quote, if you start charging those people, if you don't get a conviction, it may take people. If you start charging those people, even if you don't get a conviction, it may make people think twice before going out to exercise their right to free speech. Carroll said federal prosecutors charged more than 200 people with violent crimes, related to protests over racial injustice that have gone on for several months. See, that's the thing. The property damage has nothing to do with the racial injustice, even though some people who engage in the property damage might be doing it in the name of or under the guise of what they consider a just cause or equality or justice. Most of the charges have been related to incidents of crimes, arson, and assaulting federal officers. Protests which at times have turned violent and episodes of, So it's interesting. Jeremy Carroll, University of Alabama law professor, told Wall Street Journal, enforcing a statute such as sedition would send a message that the government is escalating its efforts to quell violence and might lead to hesitation for people to use their right to voice their opinion. Yes and no. I don't think the people really causing mayhem and chaos care so much about their legal fees or their future. Then, by the way, really quickly, Biden goes viral after playing Despacito and Florida campaign stop as he tries to win Latino voters. He's tanking his campaign deliberately. It's happening. People are actually using, like I was talking about the Matrix, they're actually talking about the computer program, this is nothing about this is real or legitimate. Like, everyone can see what's taking place. It's just a matter of time before Madam Secretary, like I said, it'll be the biggest political call of all time, or I'll end up making a great, very good political call with President Trump going 8 years. That'll be 2 straight elections that I predicted. But something's happening, and it ain't, this is not, read my Huffington Post article in 2017. Hillary Clinton 2020 is a reality. Get ready for 8 years of Trump. It's happening slowly but surely. And if you want to support my voice long term, my Patreon is below. To my new Patreons, thank you very much. Thank you very, very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is happening. And all I can tell you is you watch. It could be after the first debate, after the debates, before the debates. I have no clue when. But they're not going with this man. He's already losing support in Florida with Latino and Hispanic voters and throughout the country. Then he goes and plays a very popular song in an effort not only to just pander, he's trying to tank his campaign deliberately. This is the reincarnation of his Charlemagne the God statement that he made, which was the original tanking of his campaign. So, and that happened 3 days before George Floyd was murdered. So, you got to ask yourself, Biden isn't even trying now. He's actually deliberately tanking his campaign. They ain't going with Biden on November 3rd, so it's just a matter of when they switch to Clinton. And I told you this for the past 4 years. But anyway, I think it's very interesting. I think it's really very interesting, and you have to ask yourself, there's a certain, what's the mindset and what's the ideology? What's the mentality? What's the motivation? What's the inspiration of people who want to set fire to police buildings? Why do they do this? And what do they think of the government? And if they had the resources and if they had the legal backing, would they engage in more activities to overthrow the state government or federal government? This is an issue that spans beyond left and right. We're just seeing the far left engaging in this. And it's something that William Barr should pursue. You can't go ahead. Here's a question for the left. How many black-owned businesses, Latino-owned businesses, Asian-owned businesses, businesses owned by people of different ethnicities, religions, how many of these people have lost everything from the fiery yet peaceful protests? And if you have a number of people who communicate via social media, Facebook, Twitter, their cell phones, and they coordinate and they're using the same pool of money, and they're using the same legal help, and they're using this. And they believe in the same ideology, and that ideology is to overthrow the government, more or less. It's sedition, and I don't think it's going to be that difficult to go after, especially if you have informants. I spent a lot of time talking about either informants or actual federal agents or state local agents, because law enforcement has already infiltrated those groups, just like they've infiltrated a whole number of groups around the country. So it's not rocket science. Just look at history. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. Be here at 9 p.m. Pacific, and be here at 9 p.m. Pacific, people. We have the best late evening live stream in all of YouTube. And to my new Patreons, thank you so very, very much. Be here 9 p.m. Pacific tonight. Thanks, everyone.